So welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. My name's Katie, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm going to be talking about digital activism. So when I talk about digital activism, I'm talking about all the campaigning work that you do either online through social media or through the traditional media, the press, so doing TV interviews, radio pieces, all that jazz. I'm also actually a podcast producer myself, and podcasts, as well as other online content, such as YouTube videos, are another really fantastic way to campaign on an issue and get your message out there. But that's kind of a whole topic in and of itself that we don't necessarily have time for today. But maybe if there's enough interest, we can speak to a lovely landlady about a future session. So this is what I'm going to be covering today: why use social media for campaigning, how to do it, how to work with journalists. If we have time, I'll cover some accessibility, but I know like a lot of you are kind of pros at that already. Look at some examples, and then again, if we have time at the end, I will take some questions. And if we don't have time at the end, I'll hang out for a bit on Twitter, and you can kind of message me and I'll answer questions there as best I can as well. So who the hell am I? So I've worked at several DDPOs doing kind of campaigns and communicating the campaigns and the messaging. So right now I'm the campaigns and community coordinator at Transport for All, which, if you don't know them, is a fantastic pan-impairment disabled persons organisation fighting for accessible transport systems and inclusive street design. And in the past, I've worked at Attitude is Everything, which is an amazing other DPO, which basically does the same but for live music. Really encourage you to check out both of those places. And I'm also an avid Twitterer. I tweet a lot about the sorts of situations I find myself in with regards to lack of access, and also just, I don't know, my experience as a disabled person. I should have said that. I'm disabled. I'm a wheelchair user. That's it. I speak a lot in the media as well about accessibility and disability issues. But before all of that, I actually worked at the BBC. So my background is actually in journalism and radio production. So I've kind of experienced both sides of the coin. I've been kind of the journalist asking people questions and also being asked. So hopefully I can tell you something that's useful. I know a lot of you are already really fantastic at Twitter and fantastic at activism and campaigning. And I don't want to teach you to suck eggs, and really there's no rhyme or reason to it. A lot of it is luck, but I'm just going to kind of offload some things I found that are useful to know. So why is it important? It's not on its own. So Alan Benson, who's the chair of TFA, he says this really well. He says that we need to have disabled activists fighting the front on multiple fronts. You know, we need people in the streets, you know, physically out there demonstrating, protesting. We need people in parliament. We need people like gathering up support and petitioning. We need people, bringing up legal action and bringing judicial reviews. We need all of that, and we need people in parliament. We need all of that, but we also need people to be sharing their stories and kind of first-hand testimony and talking in the media, social media and traditional media. And I think the reason we need that is to really kind of diversify the stories that are out there. You know, I mean, you know this. There is kind of a single story of disability in mainstream media. Representation of disability really leaves a lot to be desired. And I think, you know, as many people, disabled people, as we have out there kind of telling our stories and sharing our unique perspectives on the world, I think that's really powerful. And I think in terms of getting people to care about your issues and to get people on board with a campaign, the best way to do that is through storytelling and sharing people's kind of individual stories with all the kind of detail and specifics that they have. So social media, I'm going to do social media first, and then we'll talk about working with journalists. Also, I say social media, I actually don't use Facebook at all, or Instagram. So really I'm talking about Twitter, and don't even get me started on TikTok. So Twitter it is. So why use it? It's, I think it's brilliant because it's this kind of new form of campaigning. And I know it's not new because, I mean, I got Twitter in about 2009, but I remember when I was at university about 5-6 years ago, no one, or very few people were speaking out about access online. You know, there were a handful of people, like kind of disabled activists on Twitter. I think literally I remember seeing Mick Scarlett on Twitter tweeting about, you know, the importance of like inclusive design. And I remember thinking, it's revolutionary. Like, it's amazing that, you know, someone's talking about this. And now, you know, thankfully, brilliantly, we have so many of us, you know, so many disabled people online on Twitter sharing our stories. And a great part of that is that it's accessible. It is instantly accessible to you. You know, anyone can open a Twitter account and start talking and start broadcasting. And it's right at our fingertips. And, you know, if you're clever and you know how to use it, and if you're able to build up a big platform, it can be really, really powerful. So said there about the power and reach, it has immense reach. I mean, you can really reach people that you would never have reached otherwise, not even, you know, in the street demonstrating. You will reach people by tapping into different conversations. And you can also reach people with power, and you can reach organizations, which is why I started tweeting. You know, I literally had too many experiences at bus stops with buses refusing to pick me up. And I just thought, okay, well, I'll just tweet TFL then. And they really do take notice. The other people who take notice, of course, are the press. And I know this because the press do use Twitter for stories. They will scour through Twitter looking for stories. If you have a story, it is really worth tweeting about it, because that is a lot of what makes up the news agenda, to be honest. Another great thing about it is connecting disabled people, as Amy has with this thing, with the staying in. You know, it's feeling that you're not so alone, and realizing that other people share very similar experiences to you, and also amplifying one another's voices. And then the last point here is about hashtags. Hashtags are fantastic because it's a way of compiling data and evidence. If you click on a hashtag, for example, Amy's Just Ask Don't Grab hashtag, you are instantly like given this whole compilation of people giving first-hand testimony about examples that they have experienced of being touched without consent. And, you know, this is how we build up this ecosystem of stories that we can use to substantiate our arguments. So when we go into a forum, or, you know, a meeting with someone powerful, we don't just say, it's a really big issue that this happens. We say, this is a big issue. Here are 5 examples in the last, like, however many months, with names, dates, locations, and here is a whole load of other examples. And that data is really powerful. So how do you tweet? Here are 5 handy steps. I'm going to go through them. You've got to find your voice. Who are you? What are you saying? Find your content. That's what you tweet about. Thinking about how you can kind of supplement that with pictures and videos. How do you word tweets, and when do you tweet? So first of all, find your voice. Your voice is really, this is about who you want to be online. So this is about building up your personality or your brand. And, you know, it's important to note here that it's really up to you how much you want to share online. And I think that's kind of a big thing to think about. You don't necessarily have to share everything, warts and all. And, you know, obviously it's important to be authentic and to speak with truth, but you don't have to necessarily be as vulnerable as you are in real life. And I think that's something that I have perhaps done in the past, is I kind of, my Twitter self is a lot more, you know, I don't know, sarky and I don't care about this, but I'm going to make a witty comment about it than necessarily I am. But it's also just a chance to let your personality shine through. You know, it's a way to relate to people. So, you know, think about writing tweets, like you're not writing emails and you're not writing kind of corporate copy. It's really a chance to let your personality shine through. So, you know, if you're funny, be funny, put that in. Are you upbeat? Are you sarcastic? Make it engaging. People really like a story, and so you can think about yourself like a character in a story. So take people on that journey with you. You know, talk about details and moments and relationships and opinions. You know, you are going on that character arc, and you can pepper it with all these kind of stories about yourself. Think about your audience, get to know your audience. What are they interested in? What do they want to know about you? You know, speak directly to them. And also be aware that often your audience are your biggest cheerleaders. You know, they're really rooting for you. So, you know, you can share your successes and share your what you're pleased about and proud of in the day. And if you're comfortable, you know, what didn't go so well and what you're sad about, and kind of interact with them in that way. So what do you actually tweet about? Now, the good news is you're all really interesting. So this is easy. And I think this is what I mean when I say, you know, we have a very kind of unique perspective, just because we navigate the world in a particular way. And it's a way that isn't often reflected in mainstream media. So people are quite fascinated really about our day-to-day lives, and you can use that to your advantage. So I mean, I'm kind of approaching this in talking about access, because that's what I spend my life talking about. So for example, if you come across something in real life that is an instance of poor access, you know, whether it be you weren't picked up by a bus or you've been left on a train, you know, those sorts of things. Think about, obviously, what happened? What are the details here? How did it make you feel? You know, rather than just sort of like listing it as an event, try and put it into relatable and human terms. And then start to think about the details that might kind of bring people in, because you're talking to an audience that will be largely non-disabled. And if people don't have the same experiences as you, they might not necessarily be able to understand it or relate to it. So try and think about relatable terms. And a good way to do this is to put things into real life relatable terms. So think about the consequences. Did it make you late for work? Did you miss out on a social engagement? Did you know what did you have to change in your life as a direct result of this? And then think about the specifics and the quirks of the situation. You know, what will people find unique and interesting? And I always just put this in details, just as many interesting kind of details and elements that people will latch onto and remember is really useful. I'm going to put some examples after we've gone through these things and talk about that in more detail. Also, I'm really sorry I missed 15 minutes. The BSL interpreters have switched over. I hope you picked up on that and have pinned Rebecca. It's now Rebecca. Apologies. Okay, so pictures and videos in terms of engagement do so much better on Twitter than just plain text tweets. So if you can, think about including visual material. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying about how people really love a story. They want to know what happened and to visualize it. You know, where were you? What was going on? What did it look like? So if you can, you know, accompany the story with a picture, and ideally try and put yourself in the picture. Again, making it more relatable. People see you in the scenario. But also POV, so points of view work really well as well. I found I quite often take a video of kind of my perspective of the train doors opening and there not being anyone with a ramp, and showing the kind of like, you know, the train station with everyone walking by, and people could, you know, obviously taken from my height as a wheelchair user, is kind of putting people into that like, oh, that's your view when that happens. And I don't know, it just makes people think about that in a way that they might not necessarily have done otherwise. However, most important part of this is that if you are using video or images, remember to describe them. Use alt text for your images, and if you have videos with words, speech, you need to caption them as well. And we'll get on to how to do that. So you have your voice, you know what you want to tweet about. How do you word it? And this is really hard. This is really, really hard. Or I don't know, I find it really, really hard. And I, kind of write so many drafts and versions of tweets before actually sending them. But think of tweets like newspaper headlines. They've got to be, and that's what they are. It's kind of just loads of people just kind of shouting into the void about something that's happened. And they're not stories, and they're not paragraphs. They're not like, here's everything that happened today. It's a few lines. It's got to be short, grabby, and immediately interesting or intriguing. And so that's why I would say it's the best way to do this is to front load your tweets. So put the most interesting or important or unique stuff first, really kind of in the first 8 words. So you want to grab first and then put the detail and context second. Quotes work really well. So if, especially if you're sharing a video, if there's a really kind of good meaty quote in there, especially about, how someone's feeling, put that first and then kind of a bit more detail afterwards. Go easy on the hashtags is what I would say, and tagging, and if you're going to do this, put that at the end of the tweet. I wouldn't necessarily start with a hashtag, or sometimes that I see tweets that are like lots and lots of hashtags and lots and lots of ats, and then the actual the tweet, what is being said is quite far down, and you've got to appeal to people's lowest, what's the word, like how long they're going to spend reading your tweet. You've got to pull them in immediately, and then make them stay. I've said here, try to avoid ranting or anger. Obviously that's kind of hypocritical of me to say, because in a sense, all of my tweets are ranting. But what I mean by that is that in the moment, when you've experienced something that is upsetting, if you've experienced a lack of access somewhere, you will be upset and angry and a whole load of other emotions. And you might not necessarily, I would advise against tweeting in the moment. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. You might phrase things in a way that you look back on and think, I don't know whether that's really how I feel, or, I was kind of angry in the moment. So I would always recommend pausing and kind of writing something in the moment, write it in your notes in your phone or something, and then kind of come back to it. But also, you do you. If that anger is important to you and that's your voice, you go for it. Like, I'm not here to tell you otherwise. And in terms of adding kind of context and like all the bits that aren't necessarily as interesting or important, but are just kind of contextual information, remember you can add additional info and context in the threaded tweets, but beware, not everyone will read this. And you might have to find yourself going through comments being like, yes, read the second tweet down. Just something to be aware of. I'm going to show you some examples, which they're just tweets that I've done using these things. So here are some tweets that I've sent about various train mishaps. So for the first example, let's go for the second example. To read it out, it says, ever wondered what it feels like to be trapped on a train, unable to get off? Here is a video from my point of view as it happened to me again just now. This is why I fight for level boarding. I can't rely on staff to meet me with a ramp because they don't. And the video is the one I was talking about from my perspective, kind of from my height, the train doors open, there's no ramp. And it's it's a situation that most people don't find themselves in. So it's good to put them in that situation with the video, and kind of appealing to people's emotions. You know, did you wonder how it felt, and that sort of thing. Here are examples of what I was talking about, putting in kind of like specifics or quirks about a situation. I was shielding, or still am. I don't know what's going on now. Are we shielding or not? I don't get it. But for a very long time, I was in my house and not leaving. And that is really hard to explain what that's like, because it's so weird and strange and abstract. And so I was thinking about specifics of the situation and like quirks. So one of the examples here I put is talking about how my nails, that, you know, I usually push my wheelchair and usually break my nails off. But in the 100 days or so that I wasn't going outside, they regrew and I painted them. It's just like a way to get people thinking about, like, oh, okay, so you've been inside for all that time, but your nails have grown back. Amazing. And another example there about how I'd left my bag on the door, and I opened up my bag and I hadn't opened my bag in ages, and there were some receipts in there from the last time I left my house. And another example about positive things, because I think it's really important to show good examples where access is done right and things go well. An example there of like an amphibious wheelchair that was really cool, and another example of being at Glastonbury and having a lowered bar. And yeah, that's another good way to get people on board by saying, you know, like, look how great things are when things go so well. I'm going to allow the BSL interpreters to switch over. Fabulous. Right, let's talk about hashtags really quickly, and then I'll get on to working with journalists. So hashtags, stop, think, do you really need one? Yeah, I was kind of thinking about this earlier. I think there's this kind of, you know, we really want to make a hashtag about the things that we feel passionate about. However, it's not always, honestly, it's not always the most effective way to do things. First of all, there are so many out there already. So have a think about what you're tweeting about and whether actually it would be more fruitful and powerful to use one of the ones that are existing and add to that. Things that you don't need to create a new hashtag for, I think, are kind of single events or like one-off things, or kind of one-time experiences. But I think when you really do want to think about creating a hashtag is when you are launching a new campaign that has kind of a specific issue at its heart, a specific call to action, you know, what you're campaigning for, what you want to change, or what you want people to talk about, or where you want to kind of collect people's experiences, collect that data. And it's got to be targeted at a specific thing, not general. And I've just said, yeah, check it doesn't already exist, or check a similar one doesn't already exist. I've gone through this process recently as Transport for All. We recently launched our new campaign, Pave the Way. So I've just done that, and I've just gone through this process of like thinking up a hashtag. So I was trying to write just what I did. And this is what I've come up with. First, give it plenty of time and thought. So, you know, you are creating something that is meaningful. Yeah, allow some time to think about it. What I did is I just made a list of all the key issues around the campaign. So all the themes, questions, and key words and key phrases. So I was thinking, okay, streetscapes, pavements, roads, but also, you know, building a more accessible future, and like going forwards, and transport and movement, and yeah, just kind of let it all percolate. And then think about your call to action. So what are you trying to get people to do? So for example, with the Just Ask, Don't Grab campaign, Dr. Amy Kavner, that's really pushing for behavioral change. You know, that there's a clear instruction there. It's saying ask disabled people for their consent before you touch them or help them. You know, ask. That's very clear. There's that clear call to action. For Leah Modell's CC me in, that's a very clear cut call to action, advocating for people to include captions in their social videos. And then kind of more abstract ones, Disabled People Are Hot by Andrew Gerzer and Taking the Disc by Julian Sawfleet. The call to action there is about, raising awareness, making people think about things differently or in a new way, and encouraging other disabled people to kind of share stories and share their examples. So think about what you are actually, what you want, what is the campaign asking for? What are you doing? And then kind of bring that all together and write something that is specific. So a vague hashtag is of no use to anyone because it doesn't mean anything. So if you were like, good times for everyone, it's great. Good times should be for everyone. But it's not necessarily specific or saying anything. So be specific, be snappy or relatable or funny. You're trying to grab people. So puns are really good, or do a take on a well-known phrase. So pave the way was kind of, it's a well-known phrase, I guess, pave the way, paving the way. And it's a pun kind of because you're talking about pavements, but also you're talking about building an accessible future. So you're paving the way. Wordplay is really good. Be positive, mostly, because I know that there are some instances where you want to sort of say, this is really bad. Like Taking the Diss is kind of one of those, but it's sarcastic, it's funny, it's witty. But I think probably the best hashtags are actually positive ones. So, a call to action, this is something productive that we can do, let's do things differently. We are this, or let's advocate for this. It's positive. And get people involved. A hashtag won't take off if no one's using it. So encourage people to engage with it in some way. So for example, Disabled and Cute was about getting people to post selfies where they feel really good about themselves. And that was really lovely and great to see. You want to get people involved. Here are some examples. You can see our landlady at the top there, Dr. Amy Kavanagh with Just Ask, Don't Grab. Abled are Weird is another fantastic one. And Taking the Disc and CC Me In, I've already talked about. Oh my God, running out of time. Helpful tools. This is like my bread and butter. Canva that's my secret. Just go on Canva. It's so useful to just easily make images and edit things, and it's free and it's just so useful. Headliner is a really good way of creating audiograms. Hootsuite and TweetDeck are really useful tools for scheduling tweets. Capwing is a brilliant tool which auto-generates captions that are generally very accurate, actually, and you can obviously go in and edit them for videos to put on Twitter. That's transcription for podcasts, don't need to talk about that. Okay, journalists. How to work with journalists. So what kind of media work might you do? There's lots. Obviously, this can be across TV or radio. You might be asked to do a live two-way that's just sort of like usually about news items. Like down the line, they'll ask you some questions, you respond. It's just the two of you, the presenter and you. You might be asked to contribute to a disco, which isn't a party, sadly, it's a discussion. So that's like roundtable discussions where there'll be other participants and you kind of like be bouncing off each other. It's slightly less structured. You might be asked to do a pre-recorded feature. So they might do kind of an at-length interview with you, which will then be edited and made into a package. They might use other clips from other things, and they have more kind of editorial, creative control over that. Or an interview, sort of, they might be interviewing you because you've done something like create an online pub. And what they might be asking you to do is they could be asking for your reaction to a policy change or a news event or an announcement, something topical. You could be invited to give your opinion on something, and that's usually like contributing to a discussion where you have like a particular stance on something. It might be more experience-based. For example, you know, what is it like shielding, or what is it like when this thing happens to you? Or it might be something more long form that you pitch about your stories or your ideas or your experiences. So the first thing that will happen when you get contacted by a journalist is they will ask to do a research call, or they might call it a briefing call with you. And yes, they are casting you. So this is a chance for a journalist to call you up, hear what you have to say, to find out more about you and your story, and will decide whether or not they want to book you for whatever they're asking you to do. And they'll make that decision based on whether they think you have something interesting to say, and if they think you can tell it well. So yes, they are casting you, but it's really important to remember that honestly, it's as much for you as it is for them. So use it to gauge what questions you'll be asked in the real thing, and what you can then kind of use that for your own means. Get all the information from them that you need in order to prepare. And I've made a handy list of questions you should ask. First of all, what is the peg? That's why are you talking about this topic now? And that's really important to know, because, you know, that could be a policy change. You know, if they're talking about some aspect of social care, so there might have been a debate in the Commons, there might be something happening, and you need to kind of read up on that and know what's going on in that space. What is the angle? So kind of how are they treating it? Are they talking about it as a purely informational rundown of what the policy points are, or kind of is it more of a scathing kind of, this is a really bad idea, or is it a positive, I'm really happy about this change? So suss out the angle there. Why have you booked me? It's an interesting one to ask, because they might book you because they think that you have a particular perspective. So it's important to know kind of what their expectation of you is. You know, what am I here to talk about? What am I bringing? What is the thing that you've booked me for? And also, yeah, have a think about whether you are actually the right person to do it. And remember, you know, obviously you can turn it down or point them to a more appropriate person. And I think it's really important for us to kind of work together as a community to kind of step back when it's appropriate. And that is especially true of lived experience. I would never want to, you know, do an interview about something that I didn't have experience on. I would never presume to speak for any other impairment. So yeah, just kind of suss that out. Who else is involved in the discussion? That's important to know. What other voices will be there, so you can research them, find out what they're going to say, what they're like, and see kind of how the discussion will go. Who is the presenter? And then do a bit of research into them, find out what their presenting style is, whether they are kind of, you know, hard or, you know, gentle, and just kind of get your head around that. And crucially, how long is the piece? Because, you know, what you say will massively depend on whether you have, you know, 5 minutes to say it in or 15 seconds. So those are the questions that you should ask your journalist. Assert yourself. This is my biggest point for you all. I'm gonna break for water because I'm losing my voice. Assert yourself. This is really important. Don't let them get away with doing stuff that you don't want them to do. So tell them how you want to be introduced. That is your title / job role. Have a think about here whether you want to make a distinction between your kind of work and your professional life and your campaigning. And, you know, if you are being introduced as a job role, you should probably check with your employer first. Tell them what language you want to be used. I always insist on them using disabled person, not person with a disability. However, unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. And I had an experience recently where I'm not going to name names, but I was introduced as Katie Pennick, the activist on the part of the disabled, which is just about as far away from it was just, well, that happened. I always refuse to name my medical condition because I don't think it's relevant. I, use the social model of disability. So in my eyes, I'm disabled by the environment, and therefore, it's relevant for me to say that I'm a wheelchair user, and that, obviously, if there's no ramp, that's a problem. But it's not relevant for me to name my specific genes that are abnormal, because it doesn't mean anything. And honestly, really push back on that. If they ask you to do something and you don't want to do it, just say no, and really, really fight them, because that is something that we see in journalism, is the obsession with introducing disabled people as our conditions. It's like Joe Bloggs has a very rare form of blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's not relevant though, is it? So yeah, I really push back on that. I can't stress that enough. Tell them what you won't talk about, and any questions that you don't want to be asked. If you're recording something long form, if it's like, if Radio 4 has asked you to contribute to a feature and maybe they recorded with you for like an hour, or even if you go on like one of the flagship shows and you do kind of a live interview, ask them for a contributor fee, because they should pay you for that. And of course, ask for any access that you need as well. And then you can prepare. Think about what your angle is. So think about what you want to say. It doesn't matter what they want. Think about what you want to say, what your message is, and have a good think about that. And then kind of figure a way to get it in there, no matter what the wording of the questions is. And the best way to do this is really to kind of distill your ideas down into kind of 3 to 5 key concepts, depending on the length, of course. For me, it really helps to literally count them on my fingers with like a key word for each finger. So I go into an interview, and if they're asking me about shielding, and they're like, how do you feel about all of this? And I think, okay, right, so I'm angry about the lack of clarification, like the way it's been communicated, so the way that the government has communicated this policy change. I don't think it's safe to go outside. It's in opposition to what doctors and medical experts have said, and social distancing, because I'm disabled, I can't get off the pavement, and people have to distance from me. And then I'm like, okay, that's 4 things that I want to get in there, and then I'm just like, have them on my hand. That's just what I do. And then you can kind of practice answers and sound bites if you want. I don't like to do this too much because you don't want to sound too over-rehearsed, but you can try and go for kind of a 10 to 15 second version, and then like a longer, more elaborate version. But just be aware that the longer you speak for, the more they're going to edit it down, unless it's live, obviously. So yeah, if you want specific things in there, try and work on sound bites so they like can't edit out. And then before, breathe, drink water, hum to warm up your vocal cords. I put smiling makes your voice sound brighter. Obviously, if you're talking about something sad, don't smile. But that I always smile because it makes me feel more confident. But again, that's very personal and up to you. Make sure you listen to what not only the presenter is saying and asking you, but also what everyone else, if it's a discussion, what other people are saying, and kind of be able to kind of jump in and respond to other people's points. Try not to speak too fast. That's one for me that I never do. Oh gosh, and I missed 440. I missed 45 as well. I'm sorry. The interpreters have switched over, and I'm sorry. I hope you've followed along with that. Be detailed and specific. Basically, follow all the same things that we covered when we were talking about social media. You want to have things that are relatable, bring people into your story, use specific details and quirks about a situation, talk about your examples and your lived experience, try and avoid using notes. And then after the interview, keep their contact details, keep them on file, and approach them if you have stories you think they'll be interested in the future. If it's pre-recorded, make sure you ask when it's going to air and promote it. And if it was live, or if you know, after it goes out, ask them for a copy. And if it's a radio, well, you know, if it's a TV interview, clip it up, caption it, and put it on Twitter. And if it's a radio interview, you can do a funky thing where you make an audiogram. You can use Headliner, and it basically takes the audio, it makes like a waveform, a wiggly line, so it makes it into a video, and that's a nice thing to share. A word of warning. It's as we've said, the representation of disability in the media currently it's not great, is it? It's not great. And you're going to come up against the inspiration trope. You're going to come up against the overcoming thing. You know, people are going to say, oh, that's really hard, or whatever. You're going to deal with that, and you're going to have to I was going to say overcome that then. You know what I mean. So that's something to bear in mind. Your words may be edited. Obviously not if it's live, but especially if you're recording a feature and you record for like kind of 40 minutes and they're cutting it down to 20, it will be edited and you have less control over that. Once it's out there, it's out there. And that's true of anything. As soon as you tweet something, it's out there. It's public. So, you know, always think about what you're sharing and whether you want that to be out there forever. Don't read the comments. This is, you know, if you're in an article, especially if that article is the Daily Mail, don't read the comments. Just do yourself a favor and never look at it again. Yeah, once you post, you can't take it back. Twitter can be an ugly place. And yeah, my only advice there is to ignore the trolls and the negativity. And another thing to think about, stories are gold dust. So think about who you're giving yours to. And you don't have to give them away, and you don't have to give them away for free. If you have a story that you think is worth telling and you want to have ownership over your story, maybe consider pitching it as something more long form. Maybe pitch it as a podcast. Maybe pitch it as something that you will have more editorial control over, rather than kind of just telling it to an interviewer in a live interview. It's just something to bear in mind. And then I've just written here, in everything that you do, act like a journalist. So, you know, in this age of misinformation and disinformation, truth is so important. It really harms our case and our campaign and our message if the stories are not absolutely solid and watertight. So just a few things on that. Don't generalize, be specific, avoid exaggerating or embellishing. Fact check everything. Where did you get your information from? If you're repeating an anecdote, do you trust that person who told you that thing? And kind of avoid repeating other people's anecdotes. Speak from your own experience. Do not speak for others, and don't presume to speak for others. Do your research. Have confidence, believe in yourself and what you're saying. And yes, you're fantastic. I'm not going to do accessibility because we have 8 minutes left, and it really just boils down to always include alt text, always caption your videos, and avoid weird design. Thank you for listening.